Imagine leaving everything familiar behind, your home, your people, your future, and stepping into the unknown out of love and loyalty. That is the heart of the story of Ruth. The book of Ruth is a short story in the Bible, but it carries a powerful message about faith, commitment, kindness, and how ordinary people can be part of something much bigger than they realize. Even if you've never read the Bible before, this story speaks to real human emotions, loss, hope, hard work, and unexpected redemption. Our story takes place during a difficult time in ancient Israel, a season when food was scarce and life was uncertain. There was a woman named Naomi who lived in Bethlehem with her husband and two sons. When a famine struck the land, the family made a hard decision. They left Bethlehem and moved to a neighboring country called Moab in search of food and survival. At first, it seemed like the right choice. Naomi's sons grew up and married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other named Ruth. But then tragedy struck. Naomi's husband died. Not long after, both of her sons died as well. Naomi was left with no husband, no children, and no security. In that culture, this was devastating. She was grieving, vulnerable, and unsure how she would survive. When Naomi heard that the famine in Bethlehem had ended, she decided to return home. She told her daughters-in-law to stay behind in Moab, where they might remarry and rebuild their lives. Orpah tearfully said goodbye and stayed behind. But Ruth did something unexpected. Ruth refused to leave Naomi. She spoke words that have echoed through history. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Ruth chose loyalty over comfort. She chose love over security. She left her homeland, her culture, and her future behind to care for Naomi. Together, the two women returned to Bethlehem, arriving with little more than grief and hope. Naomi felt bitter and broken. She even told people not to call her Naomi anymore, which means pleasant, but instead to call her Mara, meaning bitter. But Ruth quietly stepped into her role as a provider. To survive, Ruth went out to gather leftover grain from the fields, a practice allowed for the poor. By what seemed like chance, she ended up working in the fields of a man named Boaz. Boaz was kind, respected, and a close relative of Naomi's late husband. He noticed Ruth. When he learned who she was and heard about her loyalty to Naomi, he treated her with unusual kindness. He made sure she was protected, gave her extra food, and spoke to her with dignity and respect. Naomi recognized something important. Under Israelite law, a close family member could act as a redeemer, someone who could restore a family's future. Boaz was one of those people. With wisdom and courage, Ruth followed Naomi's guidance and approached Boaz, asking him to take on that role. Boaz agreed. He legally redeemed Naomi's family line and married Ruth. What began as a story of famine, loss, and grief turned into a story of restoration and joy. Ruth gave birth to a son named Obed. And here is where the story becomes even bigger than it first appears. Obed became the grandfather of King David, Israel's greatest king, and generations later, Jesus himself would come from this same family line, a foreign woman, a grieving widow, a simple act of loyalty. God used it all. The story of Ruth teaches us that faithfulness matters even when life feels small or painful. It reminds us that kindness can change destinies, and that God often works through ordinary people making faithful choices. Ruth didn't set out to change history. She simply chose love, loyalty, and trust, one step at a time. And in doing so, she became part of a story far greater than she could ever imagine. That is the story of Ruth, a story of hope, redemption, and the power of faithful love.